Good morning. Morning, Brian, in the back. I'm glad I can hear you all the way up here because this is a tips and tricks session. And the way that these usually work is that it's not only allowed to heckle the speaker, it's encouraged. And I know that Brian up there, he might be first. We'll see, Brian. But you might not be best. So that's a challenge for you. Who can make the best heckle here? It's all about Visual Studio. It's about tips and tricks. Not necessarily what's newest. How do we take advantage of all the new stuff only? But like, Visual Studio is huge. It's old. It's over 25 years old. We just celebrated its 27th birthday this March. So, it's had a lot of features over the years. And we don't all know all the features, myself included. I don't know everything here. That's where the heckling part comes in. I want to show you a bunch of things that I think are great tips and tricks. And you might be thinking, well, you did it that way, but why when you can do it this much smarter way? That's when you come in and you'll be like, hey, try this, right? And then I'll try that, and then I'll be mind blown. Awesome, thank you. And so we can do this a little bit interactive. We can all learn some new things. And shall we just get to it? Yeah, let's just get to it. I got a script here of things that I want to show. And the way these things usually go is that you're going to be heckling me at some point, and I'm going to be jumping all over the map, and I might not follow this at all and come up with something completely different. We'll see where this goes. It definitely goes in here. Oh, no. Look at the layout is all wrong here. So I was plugged in this morning to I have a widescreen monitor. And so when I'm in widescreen, I like to keep my output window, Test Explorer and stuff docked to the left, because then I have a lot of space here. But now that I'm on just kind of my laptop and presentation, I don't even know what the resolution is here, but this doesn't work at all, right? So now I have to drag down all the windows down to the bottom, or I hit Control, what is it, Control-Alt-1. Ooh. Oh, hang on, but I want to go back to that thing. Oh, Control-Alt-3. Okay. Or if I'm working with extensions, I do Control-Alt-2, and I get my known moniker Explorer down here. I'm going to show you that later on, but it's hiding down here in the dock down in the corner here. I'll let you know what that is in a moment. But I can switch between windows layouts here in Visual Studio. So that's really helpful when you move from one monitor setup to another, or when you're going from one app type to another. Like, I want to see different windows when I'm working on web projects versus WPF projects. Right? If I'm a web project, I want to see the Endpoint Explorer. I want to see some web tool windows specifically. And it's different when I'm working in other project types. So I can define these layouts as I like. So let's say that I want to go and I always want to have developer news, and I want that to be a floating window so I can always see what's latest and greatest. And I want to just put it right here for whatever reason. You can imagine that's a secondary monitor. I drag it over there, and I want to save that this layout. I can go to Window. I'm going to zoom in here. And hit Save Window Layout, and we give it a name. Let's call it VS Live. Okay. So now I've saved it, and it stores up in Apply Window Layout. Now I have VS Live. It's that dynamic list, and I get a dynamically assigned keyboard shortcut, Control-Alt-4. So if I go back to my widescreen here, I can now go Control-Alt-4 to jump to my newly saved layout. Control-Alt-1 to go to my default, which is kind of the clean, everything is kind of minimized. This is how I actually like to start my day, in this clean way. How many people here knew about this Save Windows layout? A handful of people. Okay. Can I reorder that list? Let's take a look. So I go to Window, Manage Window Layout. I can move that up. So now VS Live, so I can rename, delete, right? Rearrange. So now VS Live is Control-Alt-1. This is completely gonna mess with me today, so I'm gonna just move that down here while I remember it. So, is this a new feature? When was this introduced? 2022? 2012? I think it was introduced in 2017. Yeah, so it's not a new feature at all, but you know, that just goes to show that with this many features that we got, we don't always keep up to date and remember all the features that we have available. So here's one. So I've been trying to do my list of tips here based on the conversations I had with you during the last couple of days. And so one thing that came up was someone was mentioning, hey, it's, you know, sometimes I accidentally drag a tool window somewhere and like, and now I have to dock it back, and you know, but then it doesn't snap. Was it this position there, or was it, you know, was it this one down here? You know, it was right there. Right, hang on, what happened? If I double click on the header while I hold down the control key, it snaps between the last docking position and the last floating position. It's just one of those things that if you don't know, you don't know, right there. Oh, that was a golf clap. I take it. Thank you. Yeah, so control and then double click any tool window will snap it back and forth between floating and docking. Does that work with vertical document group as well? See, here I only have one document open. Let's look at the vertical document groups in a second. I know you can do both Control and Shift works with those to select multiple things and all that. So it might. Let's see if we can go back to that. Vertical doc groups. Not a lot of people know about vertical doc groups. I like it. So here's another one. I tweeted out some weeks ago. I said, let's imagine you're a developer on the Visual Studio team, and you're given 8 hours to do anything you like, but you only have 8 hours, so you know, smaller in scope. And one of the things that got the most kind of replies was to reduce the amount of buttons that we have on the menus and toolbars, like clean up some of the stuff, get rid of the stuff I don't need. So I'm like, oh yeah, that's a good one, but you know, we can do that as it is. We don't need to be a developer on the Visual Studio team to do that. So if you look at my toolbar here, you see it's kind of small. Because that's me. I have customized it to the way I like it. I don't need the save icon, the undo, redo buttons up there, because those are keyboard shortcuts. I know how to do those. So the way you do it is, and by the way, this goes for any menu, context menu, top level menu that you got. You can change all this stuff. And the entry point that I like to use is any toolbar has like these 3 dots, or if you're on the if you're not on the preview version of the new Fluent UI that you're seeing here, it's a chevron. But at the very left side of a toolbar, you can add or remove buttons, and you can change it. Right? You can say, oh, give me some of these here, and it's being added here, and you can remove them as easily. So that's cool, but these are the default ones that we say, okay, this is what makes up the standard toolbar. We give you these options, but you can go even further. At the bottom, we can hit customize. And now it gets super granular. So this is my toolbar. You'll notice I have some options here, literally options. I want tools. I use tools options all the time, so I want it as part of my toolbar. I put that here. This is an internal extension we use on the Visual Studio team. I won't bore you with that, but how do I get options up here? Or any other command? Well, I can hit the Add Command button. And I can just go through and say, oh, I want, you know, tools. And I had, what was it? Tools options, right? So there's tools options. And I click OK, and boom, it gets in here, and I can move them up and down, move up, move down, modify it as I'd like. So this was a standard toolbar, but it could be a context menu. It could be anything here. Look at all this. Like it's the entire menu system in Visual Studio. All about 3,000 to 4,000 commands. that you can choose from and move around and place exactly where you want. Pretty cool. All right.
Can I export that and make all my junior devs apply mine?
Can you export that and force your coworkers to use that? No, sorry, you cannot. This menu control, you might have you seen this before, this UI in Visual Studio before? Some people have. Okay. If you think back years and years ago, where else have you seen this UI? Office 2000. This is an Office component. This is one of the things in Visual Studio. This is just a little funny anecdote, has nothing to do with tips and tricks. But this component, we don't have the source code for anymore. So sometimes I'm asked, how many lines of code do you have in Visual Studio? I'm like, well, there are the lines of code we know that we've got. And then we can guess about what the Office team did with this 20 years ago. So this is just one of those kind of legacy things that we still got around because it works, it does the job, but it has limitations, right? It's not a WPF thing. We can't export it. It's not part of the setting system in Visual Studio. It is its own command system. And so we have limitations around that, unfortunately. All right. Here's another one I got. Well, question. If you know, about docking windows, I'll show you. I think this is a good idea. It's good for me. It might not be good for you, but I use the properties window every now and again. I don't use it that often, like the property grid. So I would go to a file or a property and hit F4. And the way I like to do it is I like to dock it next to Solution Explorer, in between Solution Explorer and my document. Because what I never want is it to be behind the Solution Explorer. I feel like when I change something in the properties, I want to be able to, see the properties of the file, then see for the next file and the next file. So if they're on top of each other, I have to switch back and forth in order to do that. So I want it to be separate, but I don't want it underneath the Solution Explorer. I'm weird. Okay. So I put it right here because then I just close out of it. So when I'm done with it, I just close out of it. And the next time I F4, it goes back. So this is a way you can see this for any other thing you do occasionally where you don't want it to be on top of anything else. Just a little tip there. All right. Okay, so that brings us to, let's do this control. What is the, in VS Code, you have the command palette, right? That's one of the biggest feature requests for Visual Studio is that we get a command palette. And so because we can see how many people use keyboard shortcuts, and so we can see that a lot of people use Control-Shift-P, that's the command palette command in VS Code. And so recently we remapped that to our command palette, which is called Feature Search. You might know it as Control-Q. So if you hit Control-Shift-P, now you get Feature Search. So it looks like this. Oh, I accidentally. So Feature Search, and I can search for fonts, let's say. And it basically allows me to search through settings and commands and everything else, all the features in Visual Studio, including fonts and colors. So let's just bump up the font color or the font size here a little bit. All right. So I want to add a class to my project here. And so I could go in and right-click my property and go down and find Add New Item, right? And it gives me this thing here. And find my class, give it a name. There's also a shortcut if it's a class to just say Add Class. But let's say it was an interface. I could do this. But as a new thing we have in Visual Studio as of 17.9, I believe, is the Show Compact View. So look down here, Show Compact View. And it gives you this instead. You can go back and forth between these two views. And it remembers where you were last. So if I go in now and say Add New Item, it should show me the compact view because that's where I left it, okay? If you don't have 17.9, if you're on 2017, 2019, or any earlier version than that, there's an extension that does exactly the same thing called Add New File. So If you're on an earlier version, just imagine that I'm talking about an extension that's free out there called add new file. And this is where it gets really cool. So, well, first of all, how many people know about this feature? Hands up. Okay, about 10. So let's zoom in again here. So let's say I want a class, right? Foo. I just hit enter. And it gives me a foo class. So foo.cs is added, and it gives me the foo class. Okay, that's kind of neat. But as I said, what if it wasn't a class? What if it is an interface? What if I wanted ifoo? Oh, like that. Well, let's try it. I get internal interface ifoo. So it is able to look at the name of the file I give it and recognize the pattern that, hey, this is an interface. Give me an interface. So that's kind of neat. So I can be really fast here. Yeah, woo! So that's really neat, right? But it's not always that I want my classes in the root of my library here, library project. So what if I wanted to do, let's say I wanted something in a subfolder, so sub, and then I want bar.cs. Well, now I have that. So I'm in a subfolder here. So that's kind of neat. And if we just go here and let's say now we're on this file, we're working on it. I've been working on different files. I'm not using Solution Explorer. I'm just going back and forth between my open files here, and I want to add a new file. And so I hit, add new file here, and I'm going to say, okay, bar, and I'm going to do baz. It knows that the file I was on in the document that was open that was currently active. Solution Explorer was not active. The document was active. And so when I add a file, it knows it's relative to that file. Okay, so that's kind of neat. But sometimes I want to do a little bit more. Maybe I want, what if I want, what should we do? What if I want, let's go to the root actually. If I want, what if I want package.json and I want vslive.cs. I'm just using a comma to separate the two names. And so now I get two files. And yeah, that's kind of neat, right? And so package.json, like it's a JSON file. It knows that this should be, it's not empty. If it doesn't know what file you want, let's say you do, what could that be? File.hat, like a hat file. I just made that up. Like it doesn't know what a hat file is, right? So it just gives me an empty text file. That's kind of what I expected. So this is a really cool way for me to start adding folder structures and all. I don't have to like add new folder, rename, and all that sort of stuff. It's all like just contained within this new UI here, the compact view. And if you, like me, always want to use this view, except for sometimes where you still want to go in and say add new item and you want all the templates because you want to add a cursor file. Has anyone here ever added a cursor file? I don't know why we still have that there, but let's say I want to do that. I would still come in and use this view, right? So the way I like to set this up is I always want to see this view when I say add new item. I always want all the templates. But the majority of the time when I want to add a file, I want to use the compact view. So there's a separate keyboard shortcut for it called Shift F2. Shift F2 always gets you into the compact view. And the other Control Shift A or manually go to add new item always just defaults to what it was last. So this is my setup here. That way it's very easy for me with keyboard shortcuts. Control Shift A, Shift F2. Does that also work with Shift Alt Insert? Oh, what's Shift Alt Insert? What's Shift Alt Insert?
I use it a lot to add new files because it's kind of a shortcut menu for creating a class.
For creating a class on interface, is that C++? Oh, sorry, I don't know. I'm like trying to figure out how to do those keyboard shortcuts and then do the insert key on my little keyboard here. We could, yeah, maybe we have a different mapping. It's Control-Shift-A if you want to add new item like this. For me, if that's the default in the, I think all the profiles.
Is there any reason to use Alt-Shift-C for the new class?
Is there any reason to use Control-Shift-C for add a new class? Oh, so Alt-Shift-C. It seems like that would then be unnecessary. Yeah, but I mean, if you have a muscle memory for that and it works for you, go for it.
I was just thinking I would remap it.
Or you want to remap it to regain your muscle memory? Yeah, I would definitely do that because you get the interface part for free. Yeah, exactly. All right. Yeah, so in order to go back up to the root, I kind of just made the root node active in Solution Explorer. But do you have to? What if I'm down here now, I'm in like a subfolder, and if I add a file, can I go up? Like, what if I do? I actually don't know. Let's try. // Would that go up one? File name CS? No. It says no. Here's the syntax you can use. Yeah, so no. Sorry. Oh. Oh. // Same thing. I think it tries to say this is the file name, and the .NET API goes, hey, create a file with this name. And yeah. All right. So we now have a bunch of files open here. We don't really have to know what they do. It doesn't matter. They don't do anything. So, but of course, we work all day. We open files, and at the end of the day, we have a lot of files open, right? And so we close down the solution. We come back the next morning, and we open it up again. And Visual Studio will automatically open all the files that it had open last time that solution was open. And it will expand the Solution Explorer hierarchy to the exact same state that it used to be last time. Okay, so all the folders, everything, it would open to the exact same state. Now, both of those operations are per definition UI bound because it does things in the UI. That means that it's a blocking operation. That means that it takes longer to open a solution that has to restore its previous state. So this part of the demo is what I call the fresh car smell. I like a fresh car smell in the morning. I know it's not for everybody, and it's also different from scenario to scenario. But I like when I come in and I work again on a project, if I close down Visual Studio, it's because I'm done kind of with what I was working on. If I leave it open, it's because I was not done with what I was working on. But if I close it down, I'm done. And the next time I open Visual Studio up, it's because I'm going to tackle another bug or something unrelated, let's say. And so I want just default, clean behavior, right? I don't want anything to be opening or any state to be rehydrated into VS. So here's what I do. So I go to Tools Options. So this is the new preview settings that we talked about. And I'm going to go down here to Project and Solutions. And there's a couple of settings here that are on by default, and I always turn them off. The reason they're not turned off right now is because I'm doing a demo for you. One is reopen documents on solution load, and the other one is restore Solution Explorer project hierarchy state on solution load. That's a mouthful. And I always uncheck those. So now, if I were to go close Visual Studio, yeah, let's just save the changes. Closing the solution and opening it back up, it's like, boom. Oh, hang on. That, for some reason, did I not check that? Did I find a bug? I found a bug. Or did it, well, hang on. Now I'm curious. Did the save of the setting not happen till after maybe I closed the solution or something? Wow. Okay, so that's interesting because it closed the Solution Explorer hierarchy. You saw that, right? That's now collapsed. It's just the default state. It still opened the files. This is a bug finding in real time here. It didn't do that yesterday, so that's that update I took today. Okay.
You can click on feedback to give Microsoft feedback.
Yeah, I can click on feedback. Yeah, what we always tell you: report a problem. Yeah. I have a more direct way of doing that. And it usually involves donuts to a team, but yeah. If I close down Visual Studio, well, it could be because I have another instance open and there's some roaming stuff going on, but I don't think so. Let's try it. Let's try it. You might be onto something. It's a partial bug, yeah, if this works. That's right. Okay, so there's something weird going on with the settings synchronization there. So yeah, so that's probably because it's the preview settings, the new settings page that we're still working on. That might be what's going on here. Okay. Anyway, that was the fresh car smell. See, every day we get these in the bottom here. So when you're on internal builds, as I am, you get every day, hey, there's a new build from the main trunk, from the main repo. You should update. Like, yep, thank you. I think 3 times a day we get the new main build. Okay, that was the fresh car smell. So the thing is, you have all these files open. All right, so let's just open some files. You go back and forth. And which file is now the one that, if you want to find this file in Solution Explorer, then how do you go about that? And it's something that comes up all the time. And the way you do it is, if you're on a file, let's go to a file that is not, so I'm now into class 1.cs. Class 1 is the active one, and baz.cs is the one that's selected. So if I go in here and do a keyboard shortcut, you'll notice how it moved in Solution Explorer. It's Control and then open square bracket S. Just automatically highlights in Solution Explorer the file I'm on. So a really nifty thing, but what I want to do is I want to do this automatically. That's how I like to do it. And so I can go into my settings and I can search for track active item in Solution Explorer. So if this is enabled, which it is not by default, but I always enable this. If this is enabled, then we get this for free. And sorry. Here we go. So now if I move between files, notice Solution Explorer, as I move around, it automatically updates the selected file, right? So just something to keep track of. We get feature requests for this all the time. It would be cool if we could do this so I can always see where I am. It's like, well, it's there. You just have to enable it. I've been trying for many years to make this default, but there is a performance penalty to doing this. I have just never experienced it, but that's why it's not on by default. Is it available in C# Dev Kit for VS Code? I don't believe it is, no. At least not yet. All right. So here's one. We ran an experiment a while ago to figure out, like, or a question rather, like, when we compare different files to each other, like how often do we do that and in what scenarios? And it turns out people want to compare files all the time for all sorts of reasons, compared to all sorts of different things. And so one of the things we just, like a little thing we added was that if you have 2 files, you can now right-click them and you can say compare selected, and it just gives you a diff view between the 2. Okay, so class foo versus interface ifoo here, you can see that very, very easily. So that's now in the Solution Explorer, has been there for quite a while. If you don't have 17.9 or whenever this came in, but you have an earlier version of Visual Studio, there's an extension called File Differ that does the same thing. It will also allow you to compare files against the clipboard and the selected text in the editor and so on. And we looked at the command palette. All right. So let me open a real project here. This is the Markdown editor extension that I wrote, that is out there. So let's just play around This is one of my only projects that have unit tests. There you go. So let's take a look. So we do have some things that we can notice here kind of out of the gate is that, oh man, I'm opening this file and I can see the formatting is kind of not good here. Also, my using statements are not sorted. And I can see from my error list that, this field should be read-only. What field is that? That would be this one up here. So I could go around, do this on my own. There's keyboard shortcuts and stuff. Like I can be effective and efficient in fixing all these things. But the most efficient thing I can do is to do them all at once. I think you would all agree. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to hit Control-K-E. And boom. And they're all being fixed. Format document. Everything is fixed. All my coding standards applied. Boom. Okay. Where were I 5 years ago? This feature is not quite 5 years old, but it is not new. If we go down at the bottom of our document, we have our zoom control, and then at some point we have something here called code cleanup. So let's configure code cleanup for a moment here. Gives me a window. I got a bunch of rules in here. The later your version of Visual Studio is, the more rules you'll find. And you'll also notice that most of them will be down here in the lower box and not up here. So this is because what's up here is what's included in my code cleanup profile. These are the rules that I have selected out of the available rules that I want to run when I run my code cleanup profile. I want them all. That's why everything is up top. So it looks at my settings. It looks at my editor config file in the repo to determine what my rules are for, let's say, should use an implicit type name or a var keyword in C#, stuff like that. So it will, whatever my preference is, as I have defined it somewhere, it's going to apply those and automatically change it from string to var or the other way around, right? For instance. And do format document and change this to me or me if you're using VB and so on. It's a bunch of rules. And so you either just click this button down here to run it or Control-K-E. Okay, Control-K-E is the keyboard shortcut to run the code cleanup. And it just runs your default profile. And you notice that there are two. There are two profiles. But I can also, so let's go up to my command palette here. So if I search for cleanup here, I can run on solution, configure code cleanup, and then I can go into the settings here. And I can say, do I want to run code cleanup on save? And if I do, which profile do I want to run? So you can, every time you hit Control-S to save your document, let's say, you can run a code cleanup. Now, the more rules you have, the longer it takes, and the bigger your class is or code file is, the longer it takes, right? And so, if you're in a flow where you kind of don't want to be waiting for anything, maybe do a profile 2 where you just have fewer of the rules, the ones that are most important, or something like that. Could be formatting, for instance. So you always have, if that's what you care about the most, add that there because that's super fast compared to running all the rules, right? So you can do it the way you want it here. Which is very, very nice. So you never have to think about it. And so whenever you're ready to send your pull request or you have a code review or something like that, you're not going to spend 25% with code style issues, which is about the percentage that GitHub found that is taking our code review time is in stuff like that. So that's kind of nice that we never have to worry about that if we just do it on save automatically. Can that setting be committed to source control? It can when we run with the new setting system that we have right here. So if you're using sort of if you're not on preview and you don't have this enabled, and I don't blame you if you don't, but then there's no way to do it. But with the new settings, we completely implemented how settings work. And so part of it is that you can go into your settings here, and you can say, hey, these are all the settings, and they apply to user level, but I can drop down to my solution and say, save this setting per the solution. And that will, it's just a JSON file, right? The settings file is now just a flat JSON file like in VS Code. It will drop that JSON file with just the changes I have that I want to override for a repo level, and it will store that JSON file next to my solution file in my solution root. And that takes precedence. If you commit that file, then yes, all your team members will get this behavior. Can you lock it down? No, you cannot. You got to fight. I mean, I guess that's like with most other things, right? It's always the battle between what is a user preference and what is a team mandate. Like there's so much gray area in there. Because at the end of the day, how you got to a clean commit with, where you adhere to your coding standards, maybe doesn't matter as much as long as you get there, right? So if some users prefer to use this tool, if some prefer to have like an extension or run a command line or whatever it might be, or just can do it on their own or whatever, it's hard for us to provide any sort of mandate around those things. We're all different. All teams are different. You can set a required reviewer for a file path. There you go. Yep. Oh yeah. Now that we're talking about it, check this out. So we're trying to come up with something smart that we say, hey, what about if we group settings that all have to do with performance? So this is so we have not really filled these in. They're very short, you see here. Or something that has to do with accessibility. So we give you these views that gives you super easy access to it. You can also give me the ones that I've modified. This is really cool. Where do I differ from the default settings? And you can very easily do that. You see that line out here? That means that I've changed it, the blue line. And you can also reset property to default value. And as something new, we have send feedback because we're never prompted to give enough feedback in our daily lives, are we? So now you have that here, which actually a fair amount of you have used. So thank you for that. So anyway, the new settings is going to be pretty fantastic. That was not at all what I wanted to show. It's not even on my list there. So thanks for the heckle. I want to show something like selection. You know about this type of selection called box selection? You hit the Alt key, and then you can either use the arrow keys or you can use your mouse to do a selection. And it allows you to type, the way you want it here. It's kind of neat. So we can comment everything out like that, right? Or prefix all this. That wouldn't compile, but you get the point. So this is a box selection. We've had this in Visual Studio since before I was born, and it's pretty fantastic. A lot of people still don't know about this. And it's very cool, and it segues a little bit into the thing that people very commonly ask us for, which is, can I have multiple cursors? And if you notice, what you got here is actually multiple cursors. So Visual Studio has had multiple cursors since forever in this box selection model. So the box selection, I'm just going to do it again. Hold down Alt, and then do my selection, and it goes like this. Okay. Just like that.
I think you can also use Alt-Shift down.
Yes. So you can use the keyboard. So Alt, and then if you do Shift, it's a selection. So now we go down. Yep, exactly. So very nice. You can move the entire thing up and down. It's kind of weird. But those are actually individual cursors. So we've had that for a long time. But, all right, so that was the box selection. Super helpful. So when we're dealing with stuff like if statements, a lot of people have been like complaining about or shown that it's hard to know where you are in the indentation or in what closing bracket matches the opening brackets, right? So this is a very simple example. It doesn't have that many nested, brackets, parentheses, and all that sort of stuff. But you've seen code that has way more nesting than this. But it's true, right? It's hard to understand always just by visually looking at it. You have to kind of sometimes look a little longer to figure out how this works. So if we go back to options, we can go to text editor, display, and say enable brace pair. Oh, modified settings. All settings. Here we go. And if we go down here, we can see we have enabled brace pair colorization. I've now enabled that. So now we have color-coded the brace pairs. So let's just take a look. So I'm going to open, see how that colorizes. So it's much easier to find out, and whether that's parentheses or type of brackets you're using, it colorizes it. So of course this doesn't compile, but you get the idea. We get that very easy visual on where we are in the opening, closing of all the brackets and in the nesting. So I wrote an extension for this a couple of years ago as an experiment to see if it has interest. I think it had over 100,000 downloads, and people are still downloading it, and they're still requesting this feature. And it's in Visual Studio, and has been in Visual Studio for a little while now, for a year or so. So you just need to enable it if this is something that's interesting to you. If you're struggling a little bit with the deep nesting. I'm just going to delete this line. How do we delete a line? Control L. What does Control L do? Yes, it deletes the line. It cuts it to the clipboard, right? But I don't want that. I want to just delete it. Control Shift L. Just nukes the line. It doesn't put anything in the clipboard. Yeah. Yeah, Shift Delete does it too. Yeah. No, it does, but it's just depending on your muscle memory or what profile you used, keyboard layouts and so on. Oh, sorry, keyboard scheme. All right, so here's another funny one. All other editors, they have this notion of toggling line comments. Like you can, in C#, you can just hit a keyboard shortcut, and that's the 2 forward slashes to the beginning of the line. You hit the same keyboard shortcut again, and it removes it, and you can toggle back and forth. And people are saying, hey, Visual Studio, why don't you have this? I'm like, we do. It's just that we have the dumbest keyboard shortcut for it that no one knows about. And so it's Control K forward slash. Control K forward slash. Goes back and forth like that. But no one does this. We know. And so we very recently changed it to Control slash, just like anywhere else. So now you get this very nice little thing. So this is something that you never know if you're not told about it, because we all have our muscle memory, Control KU, Control KC, and all that. But now you can just use Control forward slash to toggle these comments. Very, very nice. And you might have noticed that my comment right here is italic. But hang on, that's not a sanctioned thing. Except, look over here. We've updated this. So instead of just having bold, which is what we were stuck with for decades, we now have additional font styling. So if I go find comment in here, you can see that italic lights up. Because I think Cascadia Code, which is the default font in Visual Studio, looks absolutely fantastic in italics. So I like to keep my comments like that. Does that make me write more comments? I don't know. It puts a smile on my face, Isn't that what it's all about at the end of the day? But David Fowler was showing, we have the obsolete attribute, and so we can deprecate APIs in .NET and your own code. You can use the obsolete, and he uses the strike through. Whenever he's using something that's obsolete, it has a strike through. It's like, oh man, that's a functional. That's clever, right? That's not just sugar. It's like it has a more meaning to it, more function, I think. So you can use it for all sorts of things. All right. Cool. Extensions. How many people in here use one or more extensions? Less than half the room? Okay. Let's take a look at a few of them. Oh, actually, there was a question I got yesterday. I'm going to just address it. And it has to do also with extensions. So this is a Visual Studio extensibility project. So this is the Markdown extension for Visual Studio. It's the source code. This is a .NET 4.8 project. It's not a .NET Core project. But it's still using a bunch of the new C# features. C# 10 or whatever. So if I use an extension here called Open in VS Code, because it's not an SDK style project, I can't just open the CS Proj in Visual Studio. So I'll just right click it and go down here and say Open in VS Code. And so now I can see my CS Proj here. So that's really nice. So I always use that for dealing with this. But check this out. The question is, how do you take like a .NET Framework project and make sure that it gets the latest C#? And you do that by adding this line to the CS project. Lang version, latest. You can pin it to a specific version like 9 or 10 or whatever, or preview is another moniker you can use. But latest, it's kind of the latest released, general available, stable version. And so it opens up for all the C# features that can be used by the .NET Framework, which is, in my experience, most of them are, so far I think it's been almost all that I've been wanting to use. So just a little tip to kind of take advantage of new tooling, even if you're kind of in an older framework app. And this extension I used is called Open in VS Code. You can take any file or folder or project or solution in Visual Studio and right click and say Open in VS Code. And we do that often, right? Because we have files on disk, part of our repo that is not part of our solution, nor do we want it to be. It could be all sorts of file that has to do with our build pipelines or whatnot. But they're still super important and we still want to edit them. And so how do we get access to them without having to switch between a folder view, whether it's in Visual Studio folder view, and our solution view, right? Do we use VS Code on the side? Do we have them open at the same time? There could be some conflicts there maybe. Or do we install an extension called File Explorer that adds a node at the very top of your Solution Explorer that show you just any file that you have in your solution. And it's Git aware. So you see here, some of these are grayed out because they're Git ignored. So this .vs folder is Git ignored, it's grayed out, but you can open it. You can see everything here. My GitHub folder where I run my workflows, my build pipelines, all that stuff, it's right here. All right, so I can just open it. This is the Markdown editor, by the way, that we just had opened, the project here. So I have full access to all this and I can now work on it and I don't have to add it to solution folders, which is what I always did. I always have my README MD file in solution folders so I can quickly access some of those important files. I no longer have to do that because I just have all the files available to me all the time right here. And if I want to open this particular file in VS Code, let's say, I can totally do that because it contains the Open in VS Code command. So again, if I'm dealing with file type that VS is not best suited for, but let's say VS Code is, I have that option to use the tools that's best, but my entry point is where I want it, in this case, with my solution, right? So this one is called File Explorer. You'll notice that if you've ever seen any of my extension, you'll notice that my creativity when it comes to naming is equals 0. They basically just called what they do. So this is the Windows File Explorer, but it's in Visual Studio. So just called File Explorer. And it will just show up automatically anytime you want. You can also toggle it, say, I don't want to see it. And then it doesn't come up automatically. And only when you want it, you can like click it and it becomes visible. So very neat little thing. It runs asynchronously in the background after the solution is loaded and all that. So it is not impacting performance of solution load. So it's safe in that regard to use even for big solutions. File Explorer. All right. Let's see here. I have one image here, but But if I were building a website, I would have a lot more images probably, or a WPF app or something like that. I have PNGs, I'd have JPEGs, animated GIFs, and it is very, very easy to not think about the file size of our images, because we don't really think about it. And even if we thought about it, then what are we going to do about it? And does it matter? Well, about 80% of a website load time is in loading images, or sorry, it's weight in kilobytes or megabytes these days, or images. So they take up a huge portion of an app. Also, if you have an app in the App Store or a desktop app that you distribute around, like, you might care about how much does it weigh, right? Are we crossing the 10 megabyte threshold? Does that matter to you? Do you want it lower than that? Then optimize some images and you can lose some weight, right? And so it's just really hard to do. So there is an extension out there called Image Optimizer. And I can right-click any image or any folder or any project or any solution, and I can say, Image Optimizer, optimize either for best quality or for best compression. So in this case, I've already done it, but if I run it here, I can use Visual Studio. It just runs in the bottom here. It says the image was already optimized. Okay, so there was nothing to gain here. But it will run in the background a process like a known tool called Pingo that can optimize, and Gifsicle to optimize GIFs, JPEGs, and PNGs. And it can do that almost losslessly. So you can't, with the human eye, tell when it says optimize for best quality. It's able to shave about 30% of your image file size without you or a human can tell the difference. If you do the optimize for best compression, it can do up to 80%. And you can hardly tell. You can hardly tell. So it's more aggressive, but it's so good that it's hard for you to notice. And depending on your image, and like if you have a high image photo gallery, you probably don't want to do that one, but you want to do the top one, the quality one. And you can significantly reduce the size of your images. So I highly recommend you use this for anyone using images. It's just good practice. Keep them low, keep them tight. It heightens your quality of your deliverable, right? Without any work on your part other than a right click. So that's called Image Optimizer. Again, a fantastically creative name. All right. Any questions so far for those? No heckling, Brian? You've been very quiet up there. Oh, you're learning something. Okay. All right. So all of you, I assume, use more than one instance of Visual Studio every now and again, if not every day. Is that right? Yeah. And it either because you have multiple solutions, so you have solution A and solution B, and you're working sometimes in one, sometimes another, or maybe they represent two parts of the same overall solution and they work together, or whatever it might be. Or it could be that they're different branches of the same solution and you just want them separate. And especially in that case, but really in any case, like, how do you know quickly which instance of Visual Studio has what solution open without you having to like squint and look at the name, right? Or even worse, in the Git branching, you have to look at the bottom status bar and see what's the name of this branch. And do you remember to do that every time, even though you know you should do that? No, we don't. So I was showing this yesterday, a way that you can do in the new settings when you do color themes. So here, color theme in the new world here, I can just select. So in the Fluent UI, you can choose between a lot of different colors, not just dark and light and blue, but a bunch of stuff. And if I save that, if I change that, first I change to run on my solution settings, and then I override the color theme. Then whenever I open this solution, that color theme takes precedent and applies itself. So now I'm in a yellow color. And when I close out of that solution, those settings disappear and I go back to my default color theme. Now that's kind of handy. Like, that works. That would do the trick. but it doesn't take care of the Git branching issue. Unless I want to maintain a different theme for each of my branches, which is like now I have to do work and I have to think about it. And so that's not good. That doesn't scale. So is there a different way we can do this? Yes, there is. I'm going to show you an extension called solution colors. Yes. So I'm going to right click my solution and I'm going to go down to set solution color. And I can select any color I want or just do automatic. Because let's say I don't want to do this for all my projects, but I just want a different color per project. So just do automatic. Okay. So do automatic. So now, you see here I get a green line up here, or green, the name is now in green, and at the bottom, I get a green line here too. But I also get a green dot there. So when I go back and forth, I can see, oh, that's the green one. And because that solution does not roam, I can go ahead and do that here. Let me just do a specific one for this one. Let's do gold, because why not? So now that's gold up there. And now when we look here, we have the gold or yellow and the green, right? So they're different. So that's kind of neat. I can easily tell the difference. And if I go into options, this is where it gets really cool, I think. We actually can set a bunch of things here. Like, do we want gradients? There's like, people have been contributed to this extension, like open source. It's at this point, I've been the one that's contributed the least, I think. Because we can decide all sorts of things about how we want to do this, including where do we want the border? What if I also want it on the top and on the right and on the left? So it makes it even more visible. So now I get the green light. It's more visible, I think, if I do like this. You can see the green border, you might be able to tell, is now all the way around. It's at the bottom. I get the this thing up here going on. And if we switch between, so down here, you get these things. If you have separated in like Windows 10, where you have the ability to spread out, instead of grouping the same app into multiple, it also have the option to add that color down on the taskbar icon itself. Okay, so just a little. Is this, by the way, is this a helpful thing? Do you have issues with this where something like this would help? Yes. Okay. It's one of those things where we haven't been able to take it from the extension state into something that's, a full spec that we can implement, and part of that is because of the UI with the borders around it. It doesn't follow it's not best practice, and we need to come up with how do we, in a good way that looks great, that follows like fluent UI and doesn't hurt your eyes and that type of stuff, before we can move ahead with something like this. All right, so that was solution colors. Oh, then I had this question yesterday. How do we follow all the stuff that's new that's coming out of from the team? Oh, yeah, before we do that, there's a question? The colors. Yeah, can you do just a random different color? Yes. So if we were to set this here as, see here, automatic, whenever I open a solution, it will automatically have a color applied to it that's based on the hash of the solution name path or something like that, including the Git branch, if there's a branch open. Yeah, so it'll just completely randomize it. But you will stick with that color every time. It will have the same color every time you open that solution. Yes?
Do extensions add to the loading time?
Do extensions add to the loading time? No, usually not. So it depends. It depends what the extension does. So there are extensions that doesn't do anything unless you manually invoke a button, right? So that's one type of extension. They don't load at all until you invoke the button. The menu system is such that it will show you the button, because when the extension is installed, it runs something called update configuration on dev and vexy. which looks at all the different extensions, including the built-in ones that that make up Visual Studio, and it finds all the commands. And depending on some configuration on those, it figures out where to put them and all this sort of stuff. And it can do that without loading the extension. So now it has a cache of all of the entire command system. And so it will place a button in your context menu, kind of because it was statically defined when we ran this update configuration. And so there's zero penalties there. Now, when you then invoke that command, it might load, then it has to load the extension. And so the first time you invoke that command takes maybe a little longer. But we're not even talking a second here usually. Like loading of an extension is very, very quick, and it's async. The only exception to the async versus sync is when it has to load based on you clicking a button. Then it's a synchronous command, synchronous load. But if it's one that loads up with Visual Studio as it starts up, or it's set to automatically load when a solution is being loaded, that always happens asynchronously and in the background, and it waits till after the solution has loaded. So no extension is initialized before the solution has loaded, and you're now in a state where you can start clicking around.
The reason I asked is I'm concerned about extensions. Rainbow braces comes to mind.
Yep.
I don't need it, but nobody's going to tell me I don't need it, so I can get rid of it.
Right. Yeah. So the concern is real, right? Like you install a bunch of extension and you don't really know, and it's very fair. There is not really a good way we tell you. We tell you when it's taking a long time to load. You get a yellow bar. They're called info bars. Those little yellow ones that come up. They say, hey, this extension took a long time to load. Click here to disable it. So we catch long, like slow loading extensions, but we don't tell you like how long did this extension take to load, for instance, so you can get an idea. But if you take something like rainbow braces, first of all, it's now built in, so you no longer need that extension. But if you take something like that, it's loaded in what's called the MEF layer. And so it's not a package that has to load with Visual Studio. It only loads inside the content of a context of a code file that matches, in this case, it might support like C#, C++, JavaScript, and also only those files it will apply itself, and then only load what's called the MEF component, which is a much quicker, and it's also cached. Those components are cached, so that's super fast. That doesn't mean it can't do something slow afterwards, right? That does not mean that, and some of them do. So yeah, it's something to watch out for, but we don't really see issues with extensions in general having impact. We measure a lot of performance. Like in so many scenarios, we measure performance and how we're doing over time in all sorts of scenarios, typing delays and all that. And we very rarely see any major things coming out of extensions. All right. So, what was that? Tools, options, preview features? Okay. Let me do one thing first, Brian. So someone was asking yesterday, how do we keep up with all the news coming out? What are the new features? What are the experiments that we can try? What are the preview features that we can test out and get ahead of the curve there, and maybe test out, be the canary in the coal mine for the team? Like, how do we stay ahead? How do we stay informed? And it's hard because, following Twitter is very ephemeral, right? If you're not watching Twitter in that hour that someone from the team tweets something, you're going to miss it. And the blog, well, you don't have time to read a blog post, right, all the time. And, there's a lot. It's not every blog post that's interesting to you. And so you kind of forget about it. So my favorite thing to do, I think, the blog is where we do all our official stuff. Whenever we GA something, it's all coming out on the Visual Studio blog. And the way I like to keep up to date is I have an extension called Developer News. And it lives right here. And it just takes the Visual Studio blog by default, just the Visual Studio blog, and it gives me these are the blog posts. So I can just read like the excerpt and figure out whether or not I want to click it and learn about the new attached to process dialog, which, by the way, looks fantastic. But it's all right here. And you might think, well, I might still forget it because I'm going to be in here, and I'm never going to look in the news tab, right? So I'm just going to be in my Solution Explorer, and I will never see anything in here, just as I won't go to the website and see it there either. So what's the difference? Well, this one actually gives you a little, just like we have this little red one, it will give you that over here on the developer news icon. So at least you can see something is there, but it also does something a little bit more interesting, which is when there's something new at the time you close down Visual Studio that you have not read, you haven't opened developer news, but there's something new, so it knows. You close down Visual Studio. The next time you open Visual Studio without opening a solution, like so you just open Visual Studio, then it will bring developer news to the front. So basically here, it will just select developer news. And you can see, hey, there's something new. Now that's something you can change if you don't want that behavior. But at least it's like, hey, if I'm not actively going in to open a solution or something like that, then yeah, I might be interested in seeing what's new. And so you might see this like once a week or something like that, because we know like 80% of the time people go straight into a solution. So you won't see it that often. But it might help. So developer news. If you want, you can customize it to say, hey, also I'm interested in the .NET blog and the command line blog and PowerShell. And then you can save that. And then you get, you can customize it, which blogs you want to follow. So I like this. All right, Brian. Let's look at preview features. So whether you got the preview version of Visual Studio, or you run any non-preview, like a stable, maybe you're on the latest 17.10, which is the latest today, but not so much longer. The new one is coming out soon, 17.11. Well, it depends, no matter what feature you're on, or sorry, what release you're on, you will have in your settings something called preview features. If you're not using this UI, it will be under environment and called preview features. If you're using this UI, it's a top level under all settings preview features. And because I'm running, up here you can see internal preview is the version I'm running. So right now, the latest preview version out there is 17.11 preview 6. That's the latest version that we got out there. 17.11 preview 6. I'm running 17.12 preview 2. So I'm ahead, and we do this internally to dog food and to make sure we test on ourselves before we send it out to you, okay? But it also means we have many more things in flight. So all these are preview things that we check on and off. Hey, try this out, try that out, try to enable this. Some of it requires you to restart, some doesn't. My list is long because I'm on the internal preview. Got so many things here. If you are running on just the public preview, you have a lot of features too. You probably have half of these, which is still like a lot. And if you run the GA version, so the official stable release, you'll have a few options in here, but you still have options in here. Some preview features you can turn on and off. And it's actually really cool. That's how you get, if you're on the preview, that's how you enable the new Fluent UI theming. It's how you enable a bunch of the stuff we're working on. .NET 9 is coming. Oh, that sounds nice. Let me try that out, right? So we use this oftentimes as a way to try something out, but give you an off switch. If we're not completely certain that we have the UI just right, or the UX, or the experience, or the performance, or whatever it is, we will start it off under a preview flag. Right? So keep an eye out on these. They will change every time you have an update to Visual Studio. Go in and check. There's going to be something different in here. So that's cool. And the last thing I want to show you, because we're running out of time, is about, I was mentioning yesterday that Visual Studio ships with about 4,000 icons. It's all the little icons on the different commands and around the IDE. They're all vector graphic SAML based, so kind of like SVG, or they're SAML. Technically, they are SAML, but they're vector graphics, so they're high quality and they can scale to infinity size-wise, right? they're all free to use by anyone. Like you can use any icon that Visual Studio ships with in your own app and distribute that to your customers free of charge or attribution or anything. I don't know if you knew this. It's called the Visual Studio Image Library. And I use this all the time. When I write extensions, all my logos are all just one of those images. And so, but how do you get to them? So there is an extension called Known Moniker Explorer. And it's very simple. This is what it is. It lists every single known moniker. That's what they're called. It's a known moniker collection of all the images. And I've been working with the UX team because they keep an Excel file where they have tags for each of these. So if I search for person, I get stuff in like actor, right? So everything that has to do that's person related, right? That looks like a person, the icon looks like a person, or has some meaning that has to do with person, I get this. So I get a great search experience here, and I can find just the thing I want. And so if I want to use something in my own app, so if I want to use this accessibility icon, I can double click. I get it up here, and I can say, hey, give me this in like 512. These are all square. So height and width are the same. So give me this in 512 pixel size. Export this. And you can choose which format, PNG, JPEG, or GIF. So super handy tool if you want to use this in your own apps, on your websites, whatnot. It's all available right here. Okay, 2 minutes left for questions. There's a lot of stuff. All right, sir.
So we're developing .NET Maui. We know about the XAML live preview. So what we'd like to do is have a visor just to the right of the IDE. Could we
What?
not use window layout but an extension?
Can I use Visor next to Visual Studio on a secondary monitor? Was that it?
No,
On one monitor? Oh, yeah. You would probably look at fancy zones, on the fancy zones. So that's on the Windows, what's it called, people? Windows Power Toys. Windows Power Toys. Yeah. So get Power Toys. Yep.
Yeah, with block selection, there I wanted to move the multiple cursors to the end of the lines. I want to set my colon at the end of all my different lines.
Yeah, I don't have an end key on this thing, but yeah, if you keep Alt down and hit end, it goes to the end of the line. It should. I didn't bring my full keyboard. I just have this one, and it doesn't have. Oh, hang on, it does have end, but then I have to hit the FN. I don't even know how to do that with multiple keys selected here. Let's try it. No. Here. Now we got multiple keys. Yeah. All right. Anything else? One more? Got time for one more? Yes. The solution colors, whether it applies to all project types? Oh, the curly brace color, the rainbow color, or the brace colorization, if that applies to all these here, like they're colorized. It works, I think, for pretty much everything. Yeah, everything that's made a code file. The way that it works in Visual Studio is you have everything is a text file, and then you can have code on top of that, and then on top of code you have the individual implementations like C#, JavaScript, and so on. And I believe that it applies to code, so the underlying base type. So pretty much anything that's classified as code by Visual Studio. Okay, last one. Can we do block selection in multiple files, like if you have split screen or something like that? No, not different files. Yeah, no, it's only in the one file you're in. All right, we're out of time. Thank you so much, everybody.